If you have a true scary story you want to hear on the channel, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the big button to send your story my way. And of course, thank you. My wife and I were talking about having another yard sale this year, which brought up the last experience we had when we hosted one 2 years ago. I started listening to your channel last year, so I hadn't even considered submitting this, but I think I should share what happened to us with you now. We were going to be moving to a smaller house on the other side of the city, so we wanted to try and condense and get rid of a lot of stuff beforehand. I certainly didn't want to waste energy on moving things that we no longer wanted. Not to mention, we can make a little extra cash to help pay for the moving truck or something else. The neighborhood we lived in had always been pretty quiet. Sometimes a couple of few houses down would argue in the front yard, but that was about as wild as it got. People around were typically friendly, and they would wave at you if you were out in your yard. There were tons of kids that would ride their bikes or scooters down the sidewalk, and there was even an elementary school just around the block from us. Overall, it was a nice place, but the place just cost too much for us. Anyways, we started setting up our tables. I strung some rope from the garage to one of the trees to hang things up. It was forecasted to be a warm and sunny day with no rain, so we brought out as much as we could. Books, electronics, tools, clothing, and various knickknacks. People started trickling in around 9 a.m., and we had a steady stream of people from then on, which was great. Things were being bought constantly, and it just seemed very successful. Right around noon, a guy showed up who immediately made me uneasy. Something was telling me that I needed to keep an eye on this guy. At first, I tried to reason with myself, thinking the worst he could do would be to steal something and take off. Would it be really crappy? Absolutely. But I would only be mad for a bit, and then probably get over it before the end of the day. Either way, I still felt the need to watch him. He was probably in his mid-40s, scruffy looking, and he had a shifty stare that made my skin crawl. He tried to make it look like he was interested in items on display, but I could see past it. He was not interested in these items, but what he was actually interested in, I couldn't guess. At one point, we made eye contact, so I just smiled and nodded, to at least acknowledge that I saw him there. He took it as an invitation to talk to me. "You the owner of this stuff?" he asked me. I told him I was, to which he followed up with asking why we were getting rid of a lot of it. I vaguely mentioned that we were moving and just wanted to get rid of some things. He then started asking more direct and specific questions. First, it was about certain items, like a vase set. He would ask where we got it. I didn't know for sure, but I joked that she probably got it from some home goods store because that was her thing. His interest seemed to peak when I said this, and his questions became less about the items. He asked if she was home, and I just said that she was out getting us lunch. He asked how long we had been together, and what we both did for work. I again gave vague answers, saying that she worked in audits and financing, myself in sales. He asked us if we worked from home, and for this one I straight up lied. I said that we both worked from home full-time. There was no way that I was telling this man that my wife occasionally worked from home alone. He finally nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answers, and walked off to fake look at our stuff again. I continued to watch him as that conversation did not help relieve any concerns I had about him. He probably continued to browse at things for another 10 to 15 minutes, talked on the phone for a bit, and then left without purchasing anything. Strange, sure, but I was honestly just relieved that he was gone. As the day went on, we had more people come and go, more purchases being made, and I started to relax a bit more. The guy was nearly out of my mind altogether. But then a bit later, maybe around 4 or 5, I saw a familiar car pull up, and that same guy got out. However, this time he wasn't alone. 2 other men, equally rough and suspicious looking, got out and immediately looked at my house. They weren't scanning the tables and random boxes of items. No, they were staring directly at my house. They definitely did not look like they were there to shop. The problem was that the way they stood towards the end of my driveway, nearly blocking part of it, it was making other people obviously uncomfortable, and they were leaving. My wife had gone inside, and once she came back out, I pointed them out to her. I had told her about them when she got back from getting us lunch, and she agreed that she was getting the same bad vibes from them. So we agreed to start packing up early. We started storing stuff in the garage and helped the few people that had stuff in their hands, or were still looking over the stuff still on display. I grabbed the stuff closest to the guys, not wanting my wife to get close, and man, it was intimidating. I've never been a big guy. In fact, I was fairly thin and tall, but really hardly any muscle to me. When I approached them, they talked quieter, or not at all, like they were trying to be secretive. We didn't have much left, so I just hollered out to the men, "Well, have a good one," and started working on the stuff closer to the garage. And that's when my wife pointed out that the guys had moved up the driveway. As we stood there trying to make ourselves look busy and calm, we really didn't know what to do. Do we start closing the garage, leaving the rest of the stuff outside, and run for the door? It was an attached garage, so if they tried to do something to the door, they could get into our home. I told my wife to go ahead and go stand in the door with her phone, ready to call for help. Worst case scenario, when I heard a familiar voice calling my name. I looked over and saw my neighbor walking up to me, with his big, goofy smile and another guy next to him. I met him by my garage door, and he introduced me to the man that was with him, who turned out to be his brother. He then brought me into the garage and was pointing to something in it when he quietly said, "Everything okay here?" I knew immediately what he was talking about. They'd been watching from his patio and were also growing suspicious of these men. I tried to stay calm and say that I didn't know what to do. Now, he was a larger guy, probably closer to that scruffy guy, but his brother was even bigger. So I was already starting to calm down. His brother walked out and grabbed one of the tables, and as he came back, he asked the men if there was something that they needed. He wasn't really asking. It was more of a, take a hint and get the hell out of here. The guys stared at him for a few seconds, and then finally nodded and got back into their car. His brother then waved them off, and we watched them slowly roll away. My wife came out, and we all stood in the garage and talked about what had happened. I explained when the first guy showed up alone and the strange conversation that we had. He said that he saw him the first time, and when they showed back up, they were really not feeling good about it. We thanked them profusely for coming over, and after they helped us bring in the remaining items, they went back over to his place. We were now back in the safety of our home with all the doors and windows locked, but that paranoia definitely remained. Every time the camera above the garage detected movement, I was checking it, just hoping that it wasn't those guys coming back. Thankfully, it never was. This all happened on a Friday. And that Saturday, we set it all up again, our neighbors checking on us throughout the day, and we hoped that they wouldn't show back up. He didn't, and Saturday went fine. Then we had our sale for one more day on Sunday with the same routine. However, of all the cars I saw slow down and check out the sale from the car, there was one that I recognized. It was the guy from Friday. I was immediately on edge, but kept it together as he never stopped, never got out, and he just kept on driving. We kept an eye out for them, and while it was unsettling that he drove by a few times, he never did stop. We packed up what remained on Sunday, and I just remember feeling relieved that the weekend was over and that we wouldn't have to watch for him again. But then, later that night, while sitting in the living room, I got a camera notification for movement. I checked it, and I saw a car slow to a stop right in front of our driveway. It was the same car. I looked out the front window and saw the car still sitting there, now with the car and all of its lights off. I went back and checked the camera, and the car had been sitting there for 20 minutes. I started to panic a bit. I didn't know what their intentions were, so I called the cops. I told them what was going on and waited for them to arrive. To my surprise and relief, they rolled up without the siren lights, and I'm pretty sure the guy didn't expect it. I watched as the cop parked, now blocking the driveway, and then turned on his lights. The man had started the car, but the cop was already out and walking towards the driver's side. Of course, I couldn't hear what was being said, so after speaking to the guy, the cop then came to our door and talked to us. He said the guy claimed to be lost, and that he was looking for a friend's place, and that he had stopped in our driveway to check if he had the right address. He didn't give us his name, but he did say that the guy didn't have an ID or driver's license on him, so they were holding him to look up his details. We showed him the camera footage to prove that he was the same guy as earlier, and from Friday. They wouldn't tell me too much about the guy, but they did say that he was going with them because of how he was acting, and someone else came to get his car since they couldn't let him drive, since he didn't have an ID. The person that did show up was a middle-aged woman in pajamas, and she did not look happy about the situation. After they all left, I never saw that man, his friends, or the woman ever again. I don't know what his intentions were, but all I could think, with him asking those questions and looking at my house, was that maybe he was casing the place. Maybe he was interested in the stuff that we weren't selling. I was just incredibly thankful for my neighbor and his brother Jim and Greg for coming over. Since we've moved, I've honestly missed living next to him. He was always very kind and watchful for us. I don't know if those guys would have tried something if they hadn't come over, but the thought of it always freaks me out. I'm also very thankful of the camera that we had, and I can promise you, they are set up in our new place too. I just hope those guys never came back, and that they never gave anyone else trouble. This was something that happened to me quite some time ago, and, believe me, I have learned my lesson. As many people do, I love having nice, sometimes high-end things, be it clothing, accessories, or even just some home decor. However, I do not like paying full price for such items. I tend to love them even more when I can brag that I got it for half the price or close to it. This is why I love going to community yard sales in those posh, gated communities. They're always getting rid of that kind of stuff because it doesn't fit the theme of their living room or it's no longer in style. And at least the ones I go to, they'd rather just see the stuff gone than try to get some of their money back. This is how I end up with a lot of the stuff I have. I have a very nice lamp set, and even a matching bed frame and dresser because of it. Those are just my favorite items. Anyway, this is how I got myself into a bit of temporary trouble. Now, in a lot of these gated communities, you may get some kind of pass to be there, and some homeowners may even have their own sign-in sheets. It was typically pretty simple. They just require you to put your name and a phone number. And I never had troubles before putting my first name, last initial, and phone number. I'm sure it was just to keep track of the outsiders in case anything went awry. but it was a small price to pay to get to those items that I wanted. I drove around the homes, looking for the best things, when I spotted a nice house with tons of stuff across their half-circle driveway and their yard, in a path so as to not damage their lawn, of course. So I stopped, signed in with their little sheet, and made my way to the tables. As I approached it, I saw a couple standing near the garage under their little umbrella that they had set up. He had said something to the woman, who was now smiling, and then she threw her head back to laugh and caressed his arm. She looked over at me and smiled, so I nodded and smiled back before looking back down at the table. I ended up making my way to a few tables of clothing, and, to no surprise, I found a lot of stuff that was in great condition, as well as high-end brands. Even better, a lot of it was my size. I started digging through the clothes when the man that I saw earlier, most likely the homeowner, approached, greeting me. He started with just some niceties, told me his name, holding out his hand, so I accepted and gave mine too. I mean, I had signed his book, so no point in lying anyways. The conversation then turned to the jeans I was holding, and after looking at them, he said his wife's clothing would likely fit me, saying we looked close in size. I actually did tell him that they would, and in fact, some would be a little too big, but they were still worth considering. This is where the conversation started to fall apart. He stepped back a little, eyeing me up and down, and said that I was definitely similar in size, but that I had bigger assets. I was taken aback by his comment, and all I could think to do was laugh and refuse to make eye contact. I held the pair of pants that I was holding close to my chest, waiting for him to stop gawking at me. But unfortunately, it didn't end there. He then stepped closer to me and said that his wife was also selling some other intimates, and then asked me for my bra size. I again laughed nervously, but told him that I wasn't interested. I tried to ignore him, but I could see from the corner of my eye that he turned around to look towards his house, and then turned back to me. He leaned on the table and said, "Look, my wife is really into you," and then invited me back to their house later that night. Absolutely horrified at this point, I dropped the pants, said that I wasn't interested, and made a beeline for my car, feeling his eyes on me the entire time. I felt gross and creeped out. Who hits on another person right in front of their spouse? But here's where it got worse. I started getting texts from an unknown number. They were calling me pet names, saying some fairly raunchy things, and that even led to pictures. You can guess what kind of pictures. It didn't take long for me to figure out who it was. I did fill out the sign-in sheet with my first name and phone number. Before the picture started, I tried to just ignore him, thinking that if I didn't respond, he would eventually get bored. But once I started getting the pictures, I had to put a stop to it. If he was willing to do this, who knew how far he would be willing to take it? Not to mention he had a wife. She deserved to know what he was up to. The next day, I drove to the area and was able to get in with little trouble. It was a Monday, so the community sales were over, but I told them that I was there to pick up a larger item that I had bought the previous day and that they could even confirm for my previous check-in. So I got through and slowly drove down the street, looking for the right house. It didn't take me long to spot it. Thankfully, they had a unique yard ornament that stuck out to me. There was a small silver car in the driveway, and based on the size, and the few personal items I saw inside it, I assumed it belonged to a woman, and hoped that that meant she was home and home alone. I rang the doorbell, and thankfully the same woman from the yard sale answered. I told her that I wanted to speak to her about a sale that she had the other day, and she even said that she remembered seeing me there. I had a slight chill, worried that if what he said was true and she was in on this too. But just in case, I stayed in the doorway, refusing to go in when she offered. I pulled out my phone and started to explain her husband's behavior during the sale. I then went into the texts and lewd photos that I had been receiving and even showed them to her, pointing out the phone number specifically and asking her if she recognized it. The whole time she had such a bewildered look on her face, and if anything, it made me feel like she had no idea this was happening. I felt bad to lay this all on her, but also felt good about calling him out. But then her response had me sharing the confusion. She told me that her husband was long gone, and that the phone number that was texting me and the man at that sale was actually her son. Oh, and not to mention, he also was not married. She did, however, apologize for his behavior and said that she would handle the situation, telling me that the house was hers and he was not only living there, but she paid his phone bill. She then went on to tell me a few other, probably embarrassing things about him, before hugging me and sending me off with the homemade cinnamon roll. It was probably the best one that I've ever had. True to her word, the texts and pictures stopped that day. I can only imagine the conversation that must have taken place between the two of them. If you asked me if I expected the situation to play out like that, I would tell you never in a million years. But now, I have the best example of speaking up about a disturbing and creepy situation. Maybe he would have given up, and maybe it wouldn't have moved past text or calls. But there was that chance that it could have escalated. So I'm thankful that I took action, and so did his mother. And nowadays, those gated communities that have sign-ins at the entrance with security, if they ask for my contact info, I give a fake number. I'll do whatever it takes to not put myself in that situation again. I like to occasionally check out yard and estate sales for unique and unusual stuff. Having a weird brass animal wearing something silly sitting on my entertainment center has always been a good conversation piece when I have friends over. Sometimes I'll follow the signs I see along the side of the roads, or some I'll find that are posted on things like Facebook or Nextdoor. This time, I had actually been going on a walk with my dog when I saw a sign for a local sale. I carry a small fanny pack at all times. It's my purse, and it holds my small wallet with my cards and cash. I keep cash on me because I spontaneously go to these sales as much as I do, as well as carrying my keys, my dog bags, and other various things. So, I was prepared to stop at the sale, too. It was a nice day, and when I arrived, there were already several people walking around and browsing the items. I saw a few things that looked interesting, but then I got to a box full of CDs and another full of vinyl records. I love vinyls. I love the way they sound, even if it's music that I wasn't interested in. I even collected ones that were damaged and beyond repair. Those I liked to hang on the walls in my living room. They looked much better than the ugly rental beige colors of the walls. I looked through the CDs as there was a man looking through the vinyls. I ended up finding a few that I was interested in for 25 cents each, so why not snatch them up? Once the man walked away, I then looked through the vinyls myself. I pulled a few out and was looking at the sleeve for details and lists of songs when an older man approached me. He was the owner, and he started a conversation about the vinyls and asked me about my preferences. As we spoke, I noticed the man that was previously looking at them was pacing around us, and was unfortunately distracting me. The owner noticed as well, and he looked up at the man, and the three of us all talked about the vinyls some. The man asked if I was looking at buying any, and I stepped back, saying I was unsure of what I wanted yet, and motioned for him to go through it again if he wanted to. He began talking with us about what he had and why he was selling them. I actually found one by my favorite musician, so I was holding on to it, when the man started asking me what my favorite song was by them. And he seemed surprised when I said that it was one that wasn't common or popular. You know the type. You wear the band shirt, and you get questioned about your loyalty to said band. Anyways, they talked for a few moments, so I glanced back over at the CDs, when the man said there truly was a great collection in there, and that I should buy them up, and then walked away, holding on to a few of the vinyls. I went to look back through them, with the owner still standing nearby. I was finding myself grabbing several more of them, when the owner said that I could just have the whole box for $5. I was ecstatic. Even if they didn't work, or were bands that I didn't know or care for, I knew that I could make good use of them. So, after asking if he was sure, I pulled out a $10 bill instead and thanked him. I'm not very good at bartering, as you can probably tell. But they all looked to be in great condition, and he was nice, so it was fair in my opinion. His wife even gave me a large beach tote to carry them all in, since I was walking home, so I didn't have to lug around a big box. I paid, thanked them again, and headed off. But before I left, I started feeling like I was being watched. So I looked back, and I saw that the other man was now staring at me. He seemed to be clenching his teeth, as I could see his jaw and temples bulging. He looked mad. But at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. Not like I had done anything to him, so I continued walking. On my walk back, my dog would look back behind us, and then keep walking. But his stops were becoming more and more frequent. Finally, I looked over my shoulder to see what had his attention, but I was not expecting what I saw. It was the same guy from the yard sale, but he was empty-handed. Didn't he buy a few of the records? I had walked past a bus stop, and the man was now standing at it, so I honestly didn't think that he was following me. He just happened to be taking the bus, and that's where the stop was. My dog, Rocky, he was a rescue, but he kept part of his old life in him, which was a guard dog. He was treated well, but he was very protective over me, which I think is why he was watching him so much. He's fine with people and actually quite friendly, but he always seemed more on edge when it was just me and someone else, especially men. It took him a while to get used to my boyfriend, so I just assumed that he was in guard mode. I just took a moment to pet him, tell him that it was okay, and we kept moving. If he saw that I was comfortable and not scared, he typically loosened up as well. We walked a little further when Rocky again stopped, and this time his tail was down and he was starting to do a soft growl. I immediately turned around, and to my surprise, that same man was still behind us. Now, I was starting to get curious. I had never seen this man before in my neighborhood, and now he was heading for it, after going to the same yard sale that I had been to. I'm pretty sure he was at the sale before I was, so I know that he didn't follow me there, but why was he going this way now? So, I decided to try and test him. I live on a cul-de-sac, so instead of going straight up that street, I cut through a small park, which would then lead not only to another set of homes, but also into part of my backyard. My thought was, unless this guy lived in one of those homes behind the park, or he was going to that park, he had no reason to cut through there, which would confirm if he was following me. So I picked up my pace a bit, and motioned to Rocky that we needed to hurry. If I give him 2 quick pats on the back and say come on, he knows that means to speed up. I think this also told him that something was wrong because he would walk further ahead of me and watch behind me until I caught up. We got through the park, and I heard the crunch of gravel as he continued to walk through it. And once I made it past the first house, we ran. I again told Rocky to come on, and he began running with me. I tried to zigzag through the houses, hoping no one would come out and yell at me for being in their yard, until I reached my backyard. Instead of going through the front door, I went through the back, locked it, and then closed the blinds. After dropping the bag and the leash, I cracked open the blinds to see if I could see the guy, and sure enough, I did. Thankfully, he did not see me, though. He was looking at one of the houses I had circled, but he was watching it intently. I'm pretty sure he was thinking that I went into it by the way he was looking at it. So now I was curious, and yeah, pretty alarmed that this guy was obviously following me. I would like to think I would have noticed, but if not for Rocky, I'm not so sure that I would have. Anyway, I calmed myself down by calling my boyfriend and telling him what had happened, and he suggested that I call the cops. I told him that if I continued to see him around that I would, but since he seemed to walk away, or at least out of sight, I wanted to let it go. I know that that was probably stupid. Later that night, I was relaxing in the living room, doing not much of anything. My living room has one window that has a dark and heavy curtain on it, and I typically kept it closed because it faced the sun, and it would get really hot in the room when it was open. My front door also has a small window on it, but it was frosted over so you couldn't see in or out. However, you could see light, and it grabbed my attention when I saw my porch light kick on. It was motion censored. I was not expecting anyone, as my boyfriend wasn't coming over that day, so I had no idea who it could have been. But I also didn't have time to react because immediately after, they started banging violently on my door. Between the banging and my yelping, Rocky was on all fours barking and snarling at the door. Whoever it was started yelling at me to open the door. Like hell I was going to do that. I grabbed my cell phone and yelled for Rocky as I ran to the back door and called the cops. They kept me on the phone until the police arrived, but it certainly didn't make me feel any safer, as I relayed everything that was happening to the operator. He would bang on the door, bang on the window, and he would even walk around and bang on the windows all around my house, making me panic more. Did I actually have all the windows locked? There was no way he could get in, right? After what felt like an eternity, the operator told me that the police were there, and I could hear other people's voices shouting. After a while, someone came to my door and identified themselves as the police, so I opened it. The cop explained to me what the man had told him, and without seeing who it was, I knew who it was. It was the guy from the yard sale. He had told the cops that I stole the records from the sale, and that I ran home with them, which is why he was there now. Once he mentioned the records, I figured it all out. I was so confused, but also angry. He looked at those records twice, and then he encouraged me to buy them before walking away. Now he's telling the police that I stole them? And what was I supposed to do? I got them from a yard sale, so it's not like I had a receipt or any proof of purchase. However, the cop was very kind. She explained that the burden of proof was on him, that he had to show proof that he owned them, and, well, he couldn't. I even told them the place that I got them from so I could go back the next day, even with them, to prove that I bought them. But they said that it wasn't necessary. They went back to talk to him, and after some time, they came back to me, since I said that I wouldn't press charges to update me on the situation. The man was told that he needed to leave then, and that if he came back, he would be charged with trespassing. Part of me even considered for a moment just giving him the records, if it would diffuse the situation. If that would just make him go away, I was willing to do it. But then I started thinking. This man was so angry about this that he was willing to follow me home. Either leave and come back, or then linger around for hours, terrify me and my dog, and then accuse me of stealing them? Why should I? If he even approached me during the sale about wanting one or something, I wouldn't have bought them. In fact, I only did so because the owner offered me the whole collection. So, yeah, Maybe some people would find it petty of me, but I decided against it. Once the police left, I called my boyfriend again and told him about what happened. He ended up coming over that night after all. I had no other events that evening or afterwards either, thankfully. I was still in a mix of emotions from that experience. Angry that he accused me of stealing, terrified that he was willing to follow me home and do God knows what if he got in, and confused that this was all over a few records at a yard sale. Some people are just too much for me, and it gives me all the more reason to love living alone with my dog. So that, my friends, was a collection of some scary yard sale stories, the second collection of these I've ever done. Yard sale stories are kind of few and far in between, but they are definitely some interesting ones. Mostly because I see yard sales all the time. I don't go to them, but I do see them. It seems the county that I live in is pretty well equipped for these kinds of sales, so they happen all over the place during May, June, sometimes July, but not typically. Saw some actually just this week. Yeah. I probably shared this story last time, but I'll share it again. The best thing I ever got at a yard sale was a Super Nintendo with several games and 2 controllers and all the cables for $25. It was a decent condition Super Nintendo. It was a little yellowed because it was older, which, I mean, obviously, Super Nintendo. But, it worked just fine. They just didn't want it. And they had, I think, Super Mario 3? World 3? Land 3? Whichever one. I think it was World, because World was the console, Land was the handheld. So, yeah, it's Super Mario 3? Or was it just Super Mario World? I don't know. I can't remember which one's Super Mario 3 and which one's Super Mario World. I think it was Super Mario World, because I think Super Mario 3 was on the NES. I'm too lazy to look it up right now and get the actual information, so just accept this long, rambly thought process. Anyways, I had Mario, and I think 2 other games that I cannot remember what they were, but they had games, so. Like I said, $25 isn't bad for a really good condition Super Nintendo. And this was back in, 2010, so. Yeah. Still have it. But, anyways, good stuff. Never had a yard sale, haven't really sold any things, don't really have anything to anecdotally relate to the situations in this video, so yeah. Hopefully you all enjoyed the stories. If you did, great, hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. And if you're feeling bold, go ahead and leave me a comment down below with your thoughts, how you're doing, etc., etc. Obviously, I have my computer back. To those that saw my post, my computer was out of commission for several days. I finished Tuesday's video, because it was Tuesday, not Monday this week. I unplugged everything. I took the case door off, and I used my air blowy thingy. It's not compressed air, but it's an actual, device that blows air, that plugs in. Basically a compressor. I used that, and I blew out all the dust, because it was getting a little dusty. Haven't done it for a few months now, so, it was getting dusty. So I went and blew it out. Didn't touch any of the electronics, never do. Very careful about that. Got all the dust out of it, got it set back up on my desk, plugged it back in, hit the power button on the bottom, the actual toggle switch, not the button, and whenever I did that, the lights kicked on for about 0.2 of a second and then shut right off, so that was fun. Unplugged it, plugged it back in, same thing happened. Nice. Tells me the power supply was bad. Took it to Micro Center. Waited, oh my gosh. I was first in line for their tech support people for over an hour, and that was fun. Anyways, put it on the counter, explained to the nice lady, hey, I unplugged it, blew it out, plugged it back in, no power, whatever. She then plugged it into a test cable they had on the desk, and had the exact same problem, except it didn't power on at all, so I don't know, yeah. But that told me the power supply was bad, so I was like, okay, cool, here's the $40 for the diagnostics, can we get this fixed? And they're like, yeah. 48-hour turnaround time minimum. Oh, cool. I was like, that's 2 days, no content. So, anyways, had it there. lost my mind for 2 days, not being able to work, not sure what to do. Tried to work on the novel some on my laptop. I do have a laptop, it's just not equipped to do the stuff I do for my videos, so it's a decent system, and it probably could, but I don't have any of my files on it, like my templates for my thumbnails or my video templates or all my files for like background music and such. Anyways, onto the story. Or back onto the story there. So 2 days later, I get a text saying, hey, this is the technician. We have it on the desk now, and I cannot replicate your issue. I had powered on just fine for me. So, yeah. I went and got it. Brought it home. It's working just fine. So I have literally no idea what the problem was, what happened, why it happened, or anything like that. Why she was able to replicate it, but the tech couldn't, is what it is. Yeah. It's back. It's documented. I have 30 days. If it happens again, I can take it back to them, and they'll, look at it again for free. So, is what it is. Out $40, but that's life. Anyways, friends, hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope to see you again here very soon. Until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Do not forget it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love, and of course, sleep well.